Hey there, Bob from Oregon's Constant Gardener. Welcome to the OCG Fam Show to you, my YouTube buddies. Just out here communing with nature a little bit before I head on in. What are you up to? Let me know in the comments. And speaking of the comments, we got a bunch of questions in the comments we got to get to. And we're going to get to those questions, but before we do, being out here in nature, it made me think of a quote from John Muir. It's this. It says, "When we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe." I love that quote. And I could probably just sit here all day thinking about that. But we got these questions to get to. But the reason I mentioned the quote is that I think it has something to do with these questions, because the questions, we'll get up here in a minute, we'll talk about those, but the questions don't seem related, but I think if we tug at them a little, we'll find that they are. Anyway, come on up, let's check it out. First one's from Jessica Hoffman, and she says, "Bob, do I need to add PK booster and flower with my cocoa cannabis plants? I use Nectar one-shot granular in my cocoa mix when I transplanted to 7-gallon pots and veg. However, once I switched to Bloom, I had tons of problems. I assumed it was from a lack of potassium since one-shot doesn't have any potassium." And it goes on from there, but that's the general gist of it. And the second one's from Brandon Walsh, and he says, "I'm a little confused. I always thought cocoa was considered soilless and not a soil which would require a pH from 5.5 to 6.0. Am I wrong?" Now we're going to get into both these questions in depth, but before we do, I'd like to spend a little time talking about how these two seemingly disparate questions may have roughly the same answer. So let's head back to the shop. I want to show you something. So what made Jessica think there wasn't any potassium in one shot? She probably just picked up a bag, looked at the back, and saw this 0. These are the NPK numbers: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and that's on the back of this and just about any nutrient you come across. And those numbers are used as a guide for telling what's in something so that you can use the right thing for the right situation with your plants. And when you're working with all these synthetic nutrients, these salt-based nutrients, it's a pretty good model. It works pretty well. But when you're working with Nectar for the Gods, that model starts to not work so well. Because when Frank and Scott were first creating this line, it was with the idea that there were tremendous gains you could get from not focusing on NPK, but focusing on calcium uptake. And that's the key to this line, the calcium uptake, the focus on that. And that's why when you're trying to make this line work using an NPK model, it doesn't work so well. It's an apples and oranges kind of thing. The terrain is no longer represented by the map when you get into this area. So next time we'll get into the specifics of those two questions and answer them in depth, but what I wanted to get across with this episode was that we're really dealing with a different model here, a different way of thinking about this, and when you take this different way of thinking about it and you try to apply the map or the philosophy of the other to it, it just doesn't work so well. So we really need to dig into this on a deeper level, I think, to figure out how we can make ourselves part of this whole thing and make this whole thing work together. Anyway, that's the show. I love you. I'll see you next time. The OCG Fam Show, it's pretty good, it happens every day. It's the OCG Fam Show. See you tomorrow.